Welcome to video 2 of 3. In this video, we'll be using your new knowledge of the iMovie user interface and looking at editing the content on the timeline. You'll be starting on page 8 of your handout. So now we want to tell our story on the timeline and begin editing our clips together. So let's head back into iMovie. So first, just a little disclaimer about the footage I'm using. This was behind the scenes footage from a brand photo shoot. So the videographer was mainly taking stills, but in between they would grab some quick clips, video clips. So if you're looking at this footage thinking, gosh, it's a bit rough, there's a lot of out of focus, wobbling, that's because it's exactly what it's meant to be. It's supposed to be really raw footage. You can see the nice stills that came out of the shoot. But I thought it would be good to use this type of footage because it's probably what you'll be using to edit with your videos. Not polished footage, but raw footage. Okay, so let's get into it. Right, so now we want to start moving some of this media assets down into the timeline and arranging them how we want to so they look in the preview window like the final video that we want. Okay, so what we do is we go up and we look at our different options. We scrub through our footage. You're like, okay, I want to start with this clip. So to add this to the timeline, what I do is I can click on it and simply drag and drop it down into the timeline. Now to get it at the start, I need to put it right over to the start of the timeline. And now I have that whole clip in here. Remembering I can use my scroll bar to see what I have, and using these adjustments here to let me see more or less of the clips that I've chosen. So dragging and dropping is one way to get your footage on the timeline. Another way, here you'll see in this clip, I've selected it, and when I do that, a little plus button appears. So then it just dragged and dropped it in automatically. Before you add a clip, you can trim it, but I like to bring the whole clip down onto the timeline and trim it there. And to trim it, what we do is we click on the clip, it'll be highlighted in yellow, and then we can bring it in and out. You can see the duration of the clip is changing, it's getting smaller. So now I just have 30 seconds of what was, I think, a 40-second clip. If you are having trouble deciding where to trim your clip to, you can use this extra option, which is the precision editor, which lets you see what was before it and what comes after, and that lets you find the exact moment to match up. But our shoot was pretty straightforward, so we'll just click on that to get out of it, and I'll just trim it like this. Now you might decide that actually I want to trim a little bit in the middle, and to do that what we need to do is we need to split the clip, and to do that we go Control, right click in Mac, and this gives us some options, and now I can split the clip, and it will do that where the playhead is positioned, and now I have two clips. And I can, if I didn't want this bit, I can literally just trim it off, and so now it's gone. So we've talked about trimming your clips, and we've talked about splitting your clips, and that is two ways of getting rid of the bits that you don't want, which is a large part of editing. If you decide you want to duplicate a clip, say you choose this one, you can use the same right click option of Control, right click on your mouse, and go copy, and you've also got copy and paste here, so I'm going to go paste, and now I have two versions of that clip. remembering you also have the shortcuts that you can use to duplicate clips. Now if you wanted to delete a clip, select a clip by clicking on it and then simply click delete on your keyboard and it is gone. You can also delete a clip with the right click function, like that. Now if you decide that the part of the clip that you want to delete is in the middle of the clip, say I want to delete here to here, what I need to do is I click R on the keyboard and hold it down, and that lets me select a range, and then I can click delete on my keyboard. I can also use the range function when I'm reviewing my clips. So here I am scrubbing through my footage, and if I find a bit that I like, I hold down R on the keyboard and I drag till I have the bit that I want. So say I want this section, and now it gives me the option to click the plus button and that will be added, just that little section, not the whole clip. Another thing you can do up in the media assets section up here is to favorite a clip. So to do that, I go to a clip, hover over it, click Control, right click, and now I have a couple of options, one of which is favorite. If I click that, it adds a green line to that clip. So that's really helpful if you've got a lot of clips, which is quite common when you're editing. You can choose your favorite. So again, that was hover, control, right click to get that menu. If you see clips that have an orange line on them, that's just telling you that you're using that already in your timeline. Okay, so we've got a couple of clips down on the timeline now, but say I wanted to change the order a little bit. So say I want to move this clip after this clip, I simply drop it in between to change the order. If I drop it on top, it will sit on top of the other clip, and what happens is the clip that is on top is the one that will show in the video. So if you don't want what is underneath to be hidden, then you need to move the clip so that it's at the bottom on its own. When you do put clips on top of each other, you'll see it adds this sort of blue link. What that is iMovie trying to help you if you're grouping footage together. To move them together, you can move the bottom clip and it will move both of them. But if you don't want that and you want to break the link, just move the clip away and position it where you want it. Now we have our heads around how to actually physically add and arrange clips. Let's think about what will set the video apart, and that is storytelling. So when we are choosing parts of the clips and arranging them, we need to think about how it will all tie together. You might do that by thinking about a video you've seen that you liked and how they told their story. Maybe the music will dictate where certain clips go. Maybe if there is a person speaking, what clips you will see will be prompted by the words they say. Remember, the opening seconds of your video are important, so think about doing a quick intro with the most interesting shots, like the type you see on YouTube. Often video editing is in isolation, so a lot of the time videographers will have planned their shots in advance and captured them on purpose. Like anything, good things take time, and you will improve with practice. Duration you need to remember. I mentioned it earlier. If you only need to make a 15-second clip, then make sure the duration of your clip is 15 seconds on the timeline. You don't want to be doing extra editing when you don't need to be. When choosing music, think about the mood. Also think about the beat. You want it to have some variation so the video isn't dull. But you don't want a repetitive beat that is distracting, like a really loud drum kick. When you decide on the order of your clips, try and let the beats of the music dictate when the clip starts and finishes. This will give it a polished look. Now it's time for another activity. I'd like you to arrange your video clips and music on the timeline in an engaging way. Okay, so now we're on page 9 of our handout. That is about editing on the timeline and making adjustments. So now you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with the timeline. Let's take a closer look at the audio options. So we'll go back into iMovie. I'm going to bring all my clips down onto the timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything, delete everything. Then up in my media assets, I'm going to highlight everything so it's yellow, and then drag it all down onto my timeline. Okay, so we can see here we've got clips. At the moment I don't have any additional audio like a music track, but what I do have is the synced audio. So a lot of these clips don't have any audio with them there. We weren't recording audio when we were shooting them, except for these couple of drone clips. And the way I can tell that they have audio is one, by if I play it, you can hear the wind in the background, but also because we clicked that show waveforms option earlier, we can see that there is some synced audio with those clips. Now, if I want to adjust the volume of that audio, I can move this little line here, but I'm just going to first make my clips a little bit bigger so I can actually see what I am doing. So say I wanted to make that wind non-existent. Now when I play that clip it's not there. Or if I just want to make it a little bit quieter, which I probably wouldn't, but you get the idea. Now in advanced editing I would be able to lower and make higher this line in different places, so dip it where I wanted to or increase it. But because this is a beginner editing software, we really can only do an overall volume change. Another audio adjustment you can make to the audio on your timeline is if you are hovering over a clip, you will see these blue dots. What you do is it's quite tricky, but you select the blue dot and you drag it in, and what that does is it fades in and out the music, or the synced audio in this case. So now that wind noise is easing in, and over here it's easing down, and that's really handy, especially when you start to edit music tracks and you want to fade it out at the end of the video. I can also detach this audio from this visual if I'd like to use this audio somewhere else and perhaps duplicate it. So what I do is I simply control right click on the clip, it gives me these options, and I go detach audio, and now that audio is separated, I can move it over here, or I could control right click again and copy it and paste it somewhere else. Another spot you can make adjustments to audio is above the preview window. If you clicked on the audio clip, the options will show. So you've got volume here. So here I can move this slider and the volume will increase or decrease. Now I just want to point out at this point, see here I'm up at 303%. You can see down here in the waveforms that I've got some red and some yellow. That is iMovie telling me that that clip is now too loud. Ideally you want to have just maybe a touch of yellow showing. So yeah, up here you've got your volume options, you can mute your audio clip, and this next one along has some adjustments for background noise, if you've got an annoying lawnmower in the background or something like that, you can play around with this to try and minimize that noise. You also have some filters here, but I would use them very rarely because they sometimes make the audio sound worse, but you have a couple of options up here. Now over here above your media assets you have an audio section, which I double click on, and what these are royalty-free sound effects. So if I play this, so that's a door metal squeak as it says. I could drag that down into my video if I wanted to, which I probably don't want to, so I'm going to delete that out. So you've got a couple of sound effects, which is handy, but what's even better is you've got a couple of music tracks which are free to use, so that could be a really good starting point. You don't have to spend any money on any music tracks, and I simply just drag my selection down and I just move it to where I want it to start playing. Now with iMovie there's a limit to how many tracks you can have. With advanced editing you can have a lot more tracks, so you might have to be selective in which audio you have. But now we're going to add a narration. These are really great for training videos like this one, or maybe for a gaming video where you want to speak to what's appearing in the shot. Now to record a narration we have to find an empty track and we select where we want the narration to start, place the playhead, and we go up to this record button up here, we click it and we go record. It's going to count me down and I start speaking, saying, "Look at me, I'm recording a narration." You can see it's recording straight onto the timeline. Let's play this back. Start speaking, saying, "Look at me, I'm recording a narration." Now we're going to have to adjust our levels because that's very quiet. This music's very loud. That audio is very loud too. Let's play. And I'll start speaking, saying, "Look at me, I'm recording a narration." And now with this narration clip here, if we go back into our media, we can actually see the new audio that we've added to our timeline. So here is the narration, here is that audio track, and here is that sound effect. So they've been added as assets and I can add them elsewhere as well onto my timeline. The other thing with audio is you can use a professional voiceover track. So you would just bring that in as a media file and bring it in like you would with any other media asset and drop it down into audio section. Okay, so now we're feeling a bit more comfortable with some of the audio options. Let's take a look at some changes to the visuals. So I just want to tidy up my timeline a little bit here. Let's see everything that we've got going on. Make my clips a little bit smaller. Okay, so now I can see all my visuals here. Okay, so if we head up to, let's close that. Above our preview window, we have some color options here. So we've got color balance first. If I click on this, we get the option to match color. So what that's doing is, here's my current clip and I can match that color to any of my other clips. Say I want that clip, and you can see it brightened up the footage. All those who know about white balance, you can do some white balancing. But actually a lot of these are a little bit advanced, so let's just take a look at the next option, which gives you some choices to brighten your footage, darken your footage. You can change the saturation or the hue of your footage. So if I drop that right down, it now becomes a black and white image, which is quite handy. Or now it's very vibrant. If I hover over anything, it should tell me what the adjustment means. So that's saying adjust saturation, this one's saying adjust temperature. This one's handy if you've got footage that is looking very blue. You could make it a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler. This clip isn't actually too bad, so I'll just leave it as it is. Just one note about color balance and color changes is usually editors will leave this step till right near the very end, just before they export and share their video, just because you don't want to waste your time making a lot of changes to a clip and then decide actually I don't even want that clip. So it's usually one of the final steps once you're pretty certain you're going to use that clip in your video. Okay, so another option we have is the crop tool. So if I click on this, with a moving image, a video clip, you can, it's already shot to fit your screen, so fit doesn't really do much, but crop to full, say I wanted to actually adjust it so we're just seeing the drone in this clip. If I apply that, now the clip is that size. But just a warning with that option, often when you push in on your clip like that, it can become pixelated if you haven't shot it at a high enough resolution. So just make sure it doesn't look all grainy when you do that. But that could be a really handy feature if you have shot yourself talking to camera, and to avoid a jump cut you want to crop in a little bit so it looks like the shot is slightly different, like you shot with two cameras. You would use that option to have two different looking clips. Now let's take a look at the crop options using a still image. So obviously here we've got a portrait shot inside a landscape video, so that's why I've got these black bars, and there's not much I can do if I want to get the whole photo in the shot. I can crop to fill, which will, if I adjust this, will do what we did before, and now I just see that part of the photo and that fills the whole frame. So that's a good way of getting around having portrait shots trying to fit into a landscape video. Again, be careful that your shot doesn't pixelate. Luckily these photos are very high resolution, so when I crop in like that, it doesn't matter at all. Lastly, you've got this Ken Burns effect, which is quite common with stills. And the reason you use it is when you put a still in with moving footage, it can look jarring sometimes to suddenly go from moving to still. So the Ken Burns effect is quite common because it adds a little movement to your still. So as you can see, the still will start here and at the end it will be here. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So that's how it's going to look in the video. If I can move the start and end points. Like that. So that's the Ken Burns effect. But I think the crop to fill one will be one you use quite a lot if you've got portrait shots. And if you ever have footage that is around the wrong way, up here in the crop section you do have the option to rotate your footage if you need to. Now if we go to a moving clip like this one, we now have another visual option of video stabilization, and what that does is it helps with any shaky footage. Say if you're filming while you're walking, if you're on a boat, you click this, it will apply a filter where it sort of helps to stabilize your footage. It's saying it's analyzing it at the moment. I would only use this feature if you really need to. Often if you've got really wonky footage, you probably just leave it out completely, but sometimes you really need to fix a particular shot, and that would come in handy then. Okay, our clip's stabilized now, so let's look at this clip filter visual option, and if I click here on clip filter, it will bring up this option over here, which I'll just bring into view so you can see it. And these are like your Instagram filters, so sort of. You've got a couple of like effects here. You've got handy black and white. Vintage is quite interesting. What's another one I like? Age film and film grain. So these are relevant maybe if you're going for sort of a genre look. And then there's also a couple of audio effects. Hang on, we'll click out of that first. But to look at the audio effects, we need to be actually on a audio track. I bring in the options. It'll start speaking. It adds a robot effect, which I doubt you'll use very often, but you've got a couple of visual and audio effects here under clip filter. Now, a really cool option, which sometimes is hard to find, but what you need to do is you need to have one clip on top of another clip. So I'm just going to place it here. Now, just a reminder again that if you have a clip on top of another clip, the top clip is the only one you can see. Now, by doing this, I now have an extra option up here, which is to do with sort of overlays, and it's about combining those two clips on top of one another. So for instance, I can drop the opacity of the top clip so you get this 1980s music video effect, which hopefully you'll never be using. But let's keep the opacity high. You can do split screen look. Let's bring the playhead over here. And you can do a cool picture-in-picture feature. So this top clip on the timeline is now this little clip here, and I can move it, I can resize it. Really good for, again, training videos, gaming videos, when you maybe want to have yourself talking to the camera here and then showing what you're doing on your own screen here. So that's up here, but you remember you need to have one clip on top of another for that option to show. If I move it off, you see it's disappeared. Let's just put that back again. I'm going to show you one last thing. There's also a fade option. So if I fade, it fades in that top clip. Where that is really handy is later on when you might want to put a logo on top of a clip. You might want to fade in your logo. You can use these blue dots again that only appear in this situation. So you fade in with the blue dots, or you fade in with the fade in meter up here. So that's a couple of visual adjustments for you to start making your video really come to life. So we're now on page 10 of your handout, and we're continuing to look at editing on the timeline and some of the adjustments that you can make. Next up is speed changes, so let's head back into iMovie. To change the speed of a clip on the timeline, we select the clip, it's got a yellow box around it, we select Control right click with our mouse and we show the speed editor. and this adds a little toggle here at the top of the clip. I'm just going to adjust my settings so we can see the clips a bit better. So if I move it like this, it becomes shorter. The duration of the clip is getting shorter. The size of the clip is getting shorter on the timeline, and it's showing me a rabbit, which means it's getting faster, so we're speeding up the footage. Whereas if I move the toggle back this way, it's getting longer, the duration is increasing, it's getting longer on the timeline. There's a tortoise to say that the footage is going slow. And you know, if you want normal speed, you just need to find that sort of middle mark to get it back to its original pacing. Be careful when you are selecting clips and changing speed. You only want to do it to clips which don't have any speaking, because otherwise the person will sound like a chipmunk. You know, it'll look and sound funny. Changing the speed can be a really cool technique for like the start of a video. You can chop a clip up, like split it into 3 and then have 3 different speeds, so you could have it going slow, normal, fast, and it's just sort of a nice way to mix up one clip. Another way you can change speed is to use the option up here. You've got the percentage change up here that's telling me it's at original speed there, but I find it easy to do here on the timeline. Now next we have transitions, and I'm actually already clicked on transitions up here above the media assets, and we have all the options here, and if I like scroll through them or scrub through them, you can see in the preview window over there what it actually is going to look like. The cross dissolve is sort of 2 clips blending together. Blur is obviously them blurring. We have some wipes, which can be quite cool. But to add a transition, what I do is I simply drag and drop it, and it can't go on top of a clip, but it can go in between because it's about blending clips. So it either goes between a clip or at the very start of your video or at the very end. So now I can see this cross dissolve has been applied to the video. Just be careful using lots of transitions in your video. It's kind of a giveaway of a beginner editor if it's sort of overdone a bit. So use them sparingly. They can be quite useful when you're sort of hiding a jump cut or something like that. Another place you can use transition is sort of the beginning, the end. So if we want to fade in from black, we can do that, and we can do that at the end. Also, if you want to delete a transition, you simply click on it and press delete on your keyboard, and to alter the duration, you find your transition. Oh, here's one. So it's these 2 little triangles together, and then you can double click on it and you can adjust the time. So that's transitions. Now let's have a look at titles. So again, you get a selection of different titles to use. You've got your standard title, you've got your lower thirds for giving speakers their name and their company. You have some sort of moving titles sort of over in this sort of section, which can add a nice little look. When you are applying titles, they will sit on top of your footage, so not like a transition which is in between. And then we can see in the preview, I click on this and this is where I can make changes. So I actually type into the preview window to to change the text, and then with the text highlighted I can change the font and change the size, positioning. When I say positioning, I mean sort of these basic left, middle, right. You are limited by how much you can move it on the screen. These are sort of predetermined templates. Disadvantages of beginner software: they try and make it simple for you, but at the same time that sometimes limits your options. But there's quite a few options here to choose from. If you're really stuck and you did want a particular look, you can always create a title in like Photoshop, make it 1920 by 1080 and just import it in as a still. If you want it to appear on a clip, you'll have to give it a transparent background, or it can be a solid background. Now, speaking about backgrounds, there is some background options here. I don't really see much need for them. Maybe if you were doing like a full screen title, you might use it, and then you'd put your text on top of that. So something like that. So you're getting that traditional editing look of clips being laid on top of clips, staggered, but that will give you a full screen title. When you are choosing your titles, just be careful of having text really low on the screen. When you upload these to places like Facebook, you might decide to add captions, which will end up covering something like this. So always keep that in mind. On Instagram, if you tag someone, it has a little icon that shows that someone's tagged and it appears right there, and sometimes it can cover a title that you have. So just bear that in mind. Also with your titles, you can change the duration of how long they appear by just simply trimming them, and you can change position just by dragging them. So if I go here, move my playhead, the title now appears here. Just a couple more things with titles. If you click on your title and we highlight the text again, you can bold, italics, and add an outline if you wish. The other thing you can do is change the colour. So if you click on that box there, it will bring up a colour wheel that's off screen, but I've just brought it onto screen for you, and I can choose what colour to make that text. So now if I scroll my playhead, we have blue text, which is not ideal, but you get the idea. And then lastly, I'm just going to import a logo. So I don't have my logo in my media assets yet, so let me just import that quickly. So adding some footage, I'm going to go to my graphics folder, I'm going to choose a white logo, import it. So now my logo is in the media assets. If I drag it down onto top of a clip, I can see it appearing on top of the clip. It's moving, so I can tell it has a Ken Burns effect added, so I'm going to take that off. Now at the moment it's appearing much too big, and I don't have many options to change the size, but I'm going to go back to that overlay option and do the picture in picture option, and now I can make the logo, holding down Control to keep its proportions the size that I want. So usually put a logo at the end, maybe the start of your video, but let's have a look at what that looks like. That's sort of centered, I think. There you go. So that brings us to the end of making adjustments on the timeline. Now it's your turn to practice. So why don't you have a go adding a main title, a lower third, and a logo to your video, and I want you to experiment with the other adjustments to complete your video.